pinchy things and the little picky things. There. Pinchy, picky, pulley.
Tim Conway made the world laugh like it was the easiest thing on earth. But behind that smile was a man who kept parts of himself locked away, even from the people who worked beside him for years. Tim Conway faced heartbreaking challenges the public never fully saw, from private doubts and the constant collapse of his solo shows to a painful family battle in his final years that threatened to overshadow everything he built. After he died, some faces were notably absent at his burial. But the absence of one co-star in particular would reveal that behind the man who was always laughing were secret feuds, tensions, and misunderstandings. The rise of Tim Conway. Tim Conway was one of the funniest and most joyful men Hollywood ever produced. For millions of viewers who grew up watching The Carol Burnett Show, he was the reason you could not stop laughing. The man could make anything funny. A wrong word, a fake stumble, a funny accent. He made it look effortless. But behind the scenes, things were not always so joyful. And when Tim Conway died in 2019, the people who knew him best started to understand something that fans had never noticed. Tim Conway was born Thomas Daniel Conway on December 15, 1933, in Willoughby, Ohio, a suburb of Cleveland. His father, Daniel Conway, was an Irish immigrant who worked as a groomer for polo ponies, while his mother, Sofia Murgoiu, was a first-generation Romanian-American. The family struggled financially during the Great Depression, moving frequently around the Cleveland area. Money was tight, and stability was rare. But young Tom Conway had a talent that would eventually carry him out of Ohio and into television history. He was funny. What made Conway funny in school was not a joke he rehearsed. It was a problem he did not know he had. Conway, who had undiagnosed dyslexia as a child, would sometimes misread words, and this would make everyone laugh. The specific moment that changed his life came during a class reading of a book called They Were Expendable. Conway read the title out loud as They Were Expandable, and the class erupted in laughter. At that moment, Conway realized he was funny. That was how a learning disability turned into a comedy career. His original career goal had nothing to do with comedy. He wanted to become a jockey, even though he was terrified of horses. He later became a fan of thoroughbred racing and even owned racehorses occasionally, but the jockey dream never came true. Instead, he went to Chagrin Falls High School, where he excelled at tumbling and gymnastics. He studied speech and dramatics at Bowling Green State University, majoring in television and radio. But while college gave him a foundation, the Army gave him a story. Conway served in the United States Army from 1956 to 1958, stationed in Seattle to protect the city from what he sarcastically called the Red Menace. The most famous incident from his military service is now the stuff of legend. While on guard duty, he fell asleep in a car and forgot his rifle. Desperate, he found a long neon tube in the garbage. When a lieutenant walked by, Conway pointed the tube at him and shouted, "Halt!" The lieutenant asked what the tube was. Conway replied that it was a light bulb, and if the lieutenant came any closer, he would turn it on. The lieutenant had no sense of humor, and Conway was punished with 2 extra weeks of service painting rocks. After the Army, Conway returned to Cleveland and got his first television job at a television station. He met a man named Ernie Anderson, who would later become famous as the horror host Ghoulardi. Conway later admitted that he had lied to get the job. He told them Ernie was a talent and that he was a director, even though Ernie had very little talent and he had absolutely no experience as a director. This lack of experience would eventually begin to show when he was given a show to handle. Because he did not know how to back time movies, which means calculating the right timing for commercials, the movies always ran over. To fix this problem, Fridays were dedicated to showing the missed endings from the previous 4 days. The show was so bad that no real guests would agree to appear, so Conway played every guest himself. Ernie Anderson would introduce the world's greatest matador, and Conway would run out and ad-lib an entirely new character without knowing the setup. He played the role of a matador, a saxophone player, and even an antique dealer. Conway could make anything work. Eventually, he was fired in 1962, partially because he misled management into thinking he had directing experience. The irony is that the executive who fired him pushed him toward Hollywood. When Conway hesitated to leave Cleveland for a show called McHale's Navy, the executive made it easy. He told Conway he was fired. But before McHale's Navy, there was a crucial break. In 1961, actress Rose Marie, who played Sally Rogers on The Dick Van Dyke Show, visited WJW-TV and saw tapes of Conway's skits. She took him under her wing and arranged an audition for The Steve Allen Show. Conway impressed Steve Allen so much that he got a regular spot. Steve Allen suggested he change his name from Tom to Tim to avoid confusion with a British actor named Tom Conway. McHale's Navy ran from 1962 to 1966. Conway played Ensign Charles Parker, the bumbling and naive executive officer. He starred alongside Ernest Borgnine, who became a lifelong mentor, and Joe Flynn. The show produced 138 episodes over 4 seasons, and it made Conway a recognizable face. But his next project nearly ended his career before it really started. Turn On was a countercultural sketch comedy show created by the producer of Laugh In, but it is now considered one of the biggest fails in television history. The show was so offensive that several ABC affiliates, including one in Cleveland, refused to return to the program after the first commercial break. Conway remarked that the premiere party he attended was also the cancellation party. The show was pulled after 1 episode. Conway's career would change when he got the opportunity to be on The Carol Burnett Show, although he was not an original cast member of the show. He had been a frequent guest star for the first 8 seasons, but he officially became a regular starting with the 1975 to 1976 season. He was the first new permanent cast member added since the show began. Carol Burnett introduced him to Harvey Korman by taking Conway to the basement, where Korman was handcuffed to a pipe. Korman allegedly joked that a nobody was going to be working with him, but that nobody would go on to win 6 Primetime Emmys, 5 for his work on The Carol Burnett Show, and 1 later for a guest appearance on 30 Rock. Tim Conway was beloved on screen, but off-screen, there was a side of him that audiences never saw. And when he died, the people he worked with began to speak up about what he was really like behind the cameras. Tim Conway's Hollywood reputation. Tim Conway was one of the funniest men in Hollywood, yet Hollywood had no idea what to do with him. Nearly everyone who worked with him, wrote for him, or tried to build a show around him said this about him. Comedy writer Mark Evanier, who was present on the set of The Carol Burnett Show, wrote that Conway's reputation was both unfair and appropriate. Unfair because Conway was a brilliant actor, capable of far more than the public ever saw. Appropriate because most people only remember him as that guy who made Harvey Korman break up laughing. Evanier called those breaking character moments cheap, easy laughs that overshadowed Conway's actual acting talent. The problem was that everyone in Hollywood agreed Conway was hilarious, but they just could not figure out how to package it into a television series. That reputation followed him his entire career. The way Conway worked explains a lot about where that reputation came from. During dress rehearsal with a live audience, he would perform sketches exactly as written. Harvey Korman knew what was coming and rarely broke character during those run-throughs. But after the dress rehearsal, Conway would ask the director a simple question. Did you get it? If the director confirmed that he had an arable straight version in the can, Conway was permitted to do whatever he liked during the final taping. That was when the magic happened. The show's editors would later compare both versions. By every professional measure, structure, pacing, and writing, the scripted version was a much better sketch. But audiences overwhelmingly preferred watching Korman lose control and break character. So the producers almost always broadcast the chaotic, improvised version. This became Conway's signature, but it also became a problem. He starred in a staggering number of failed shows and unsold pilots over the years. Rango in 1967, The Tim Conway Show in 1970, The Tim Conway Comedy Hour also in 1970, another Tim Conway Show in 1980, and Ace Crawford, Private Eye in 1983. Each one came with high hopes, yet each one ended quickly. In fact, his car license plate famously read 13 weeks, a joke about how fast his shows were canceled. When asked about his failed solo vehicles, Conway would joke that he hoped each new show would last long enough to time a hard-boiled egg. There is an irony to Conway's reputation that nobody could quite resolve. His improvisations did not use any bad words except for mama. He was clean, family-friendly, and universally liked by everyone who met him. Yet his most famous reputation, destroying Harvey Korman on live television, came from behavior that some in the industry labeled unprofessional. The audience loved it. The writers resented it because it undermined their carefully crafted scripts. The guest stars tolerated it because they had no choice. And Hollywood never figured out how to sell him as a leading man. Conway was beloved on screen, but behind the scenes, there was a distance between him and almost everyone else. He was not mean. He was not difficult. He was just private in a way that confused people who expected him to be as open off stage as he was on it. And when he died, the people who thought they knew him realized they had missed something important. Something about the way he lived, the way he loved, and the way he kept certain people at arm's length for decades. That distance would become impossible to ignore when the details of his final days came to light. The personal challenges that followed. Conway. For a man who made millions of people laugh, Tim Conway carried a surprising amount of weight off stage. Some of it came from the people closest to him, some of it came from his own body, and some of it would not surface until the very end of his life, when the people who loved him could no longer agree on how to care for him. The first and perhaps deepest wound came from his own mother. Even after Conway found success on McHale's Navy, a hit show that ran for 4 seasons and made him a recognizable face across America, his mother, Sophia, was not convinced he had made it. She watched him on television, saw him make millions of people laugh, and still suggested he move back to Ohio to work at a hardware store. In her eyes, that was a real job. What he was doing in Hollywood was something else entirely. Conway asked her if she had been watching television for the past 2 or 3 years, and her response was telling. She said she saw him on television, but that the career was not going to last. She told him he had a chance to get a good, steady job and that he should take it while he still could. Sophia remained skeptical of show business as a legitimate career until late in her life. The son who made America laugh could not convince his own mother that what he did mattered. That kind of rejection, even from a well-meaning parent, leaves a mark. It is hard to feel like a success when the person who raised you still thinks you should be stocking shelves at a hardware store. But dealing with doubt from his mother was not the only challenge Conway had to deal with. His complicated love life would also add to his struggles. Conway found love early in his career. He married Mary Ann Dalton in 1961. The same year he landed his first major television break on The Steve Allen Show. It was a year of new beginnings, a new wife, a new career, and a new life in Hollywood. The marriage lasted 17 years, which is a lifetime by Hollywood standards. Together they had 6 children: Kellyanne, Timothy Jr., Patrick, Jamie, Corey, and Cheyenne. 6 kids in 17 years meant a household that was always busy, always loud, and always full of the chaos that comes with raising a large family. But in 1978, the marriage ended. The divorce was quiet, with no public scandals or headlines. The public never learned exactly what went wrong, and Conway never offered an explanation. 6 years later, in 1984, Conway got married again, this time to Charlene Fusco del Sardo Beatty. Charlene was not a Hollywood newcomer. She had worked as Carol Burnett's personal secretary, which meant she already knew the world Conway came from. She understood the long hours, the pressure of live television, and the strange rhythm of a comedian's life. Charlene brought a daughter from a previous marriage into the family, making Conway a stepfather. The blended family now included 7 children total, 6 biological children and 1 stepdaughter. By all appearances, it was a happy second act for a man who had spent his first marriage raising 6 kids and then watching that marriage fall apart. But even as Conway seemed to have found stability in his personal life, his body was betraying him in ways he did not want the public to know. He was diagnosed with normal pressure hydrocephalus, a neurological condition that most people have never heard of. The disease causes cerebrospinal fluid to accumulate in the brain's ventricles. That fluid buildup puts pressure on the brain, and over time, that pressure causes real damage. The early symptoms of normal pressure hydrocephalus are subtle. The early symptoms are subtle at first: difficulty walking, urinary incontinence, mild cognitive decline. Nothing that would be obvious to a television audience watching him perform a sketch or voice Barnacle Boy on SpongeBob SquarePants. Conway kept this diagnosis out of the public eye for years while continuing to work. He did not want pity. He just wanted to keep making people laugh. There is something particularly cruel about the disease Conway faced. Unlike Alzheimer's, which has no real treatment and only gets worse over time, normal pressure hydrocephalus is sometimes treatable. Doctors can install a surgical shunt that drains the excess fluid from the brain. For some patients, the improvement is dramatic. They can walk again. Their thinking clears, and they get their lives back. But not everyone responds to the treatment, and Conway's case progressed despite whatever medical interventions he received. The symptoms got worse over time. Walking became more difficult. His cognitive decline became more noticeable. And still, Conway kept working. He voiced characters on animated shows. He made guest appearances, all because he did not want to be remembered as the guy who got sick and gave up. But by 2018, when Conway was 84 years old, the private battle could no longer stay private. The people who loved him could not agree on how to care for him. His health had declined to the point where difficult decisions had to be made, and the family he had built over decades could not find common ground. A daughter believed one thing. His wife believed another. And at the center of it all was a comedy legend who could no longer speak for himself. The conservatorship battle. The battle began when Conway's daughter Kelly filed court documents asking to be appointed conservator of her father. Kelly was 56 years old at the time, one of the 6 children from Conway's first marriage to Mary Ann Dalton. Her reason for filing was specific and alarming. She alleged that Conway's wife, Charlene, was planning to move him out of the excellent skilled nursing facility where he was currently staying and place him into a lesser quality home. Kelly claimed the proposed new facility would not have registered nurses at all times, nor would it have his 24-hour caregiver and speech therapist to help with swallowing. For a man with Conway's medical condition, those were not minor details. They were matters of life and death. Kelly's description of her father's condition in the court filing was devastating. She stated that Conway was almost entirely unresponsive and could not properly provide for his personal needs for physical health, food, and clothing. This was not the Tim Conway millions of Americans remembered from The Carol Burnett Show. This was a man whose body and mind had failed him to the point where he needed around-the-clock care just to survive. A week after her initial filing, Kelly Conway was granted a temporary restraining order, preventing Charlene from moving Conway to a new residence. Kelly argued in the documents that Conway currently had his own private room and a caregiver who had been assisting him for 2 years, attending to him 24 hours a day. She also stated that Conway's various medical conditions put him at risk of being a subject of medical emergencies. Moving him to a facility without the proper staff, she argued, could literally kill him. But in September 2018, a judge rejected Kelly's petition for temporary conservatorship. The court did not side with Kelly's request to take control of her father's medical decisions. That was a significant setback for the daughter who believed she was fighting to save her father's life. The next month, in October 2018, Charlene Conway filed her own court papers. Her position was clear. She did not believe Conway needed a conservator at all. But she added that if a conservator was deemed necessary by the court, she should be the one appointed. She was his wife of 34 years. She had been by his side through the good times and the bad. In her view, no one knew what was best for Tim Conway better than she did. The legal fight quickly turned personal. Charlene accused Kelly of having relied on a false medical record and of breaching her father's right to medical privacy. She was essentially saying that Conway's daughter had no right to access his medical information and that the records she used in court were not accurate. That is a serious accusation in any family dispute, but in a conservatorship battle involving a beloved public figure, it carried even more weight. Then Bob Newhart stepped in. In August 2018, Conway's longtime friend and fellow comedy legend tweeted a public statement defending Charlene. Newhart wrote that he and his wife Ginny had been friends with Charlene and Tim for many years and wanted to assure everyone that Conway was receiving the most devoted care. That statement from someone of Newhart's stature was not just a friendly gesture. It was a public endorsement of Charlene's fitness as a caregiver and a subtle rebuke to Kelly's claims. Kelly did not back down. Her core complaint remained the same throughout the legal fight. She believed her stepmother was trying to move her father to a facility with inadequate medical supervision. She argued that moving him to such a facility without skilled nurses on staff in his current condition would be harmful to his health and life. She also claimed she was being denied access to her father. In a statement through her publicist, she said that no child, young or old, should be kept from seeing their mom or dad by their step-parent. The fight dragged on for more than a year. Kelly's publicist told USA Today that she was very happy with the outcome after more than a year of fighting to keep her dad safe and sound. But that outcome was not what Kelly had originally asked for. On March 26, 2019, approximately 6 weeks before Conway's death, the legal dispute was settled. The court found clear and convincing evidence that a conservatorship for Conway was necessary. But here is the part that mattered most. Charlene Conway was appointed sole conservator of her husband. The court found her suitable and qualified for the role. According to the court filing, Conway consented to her appointment through his legal representation. The court also declared that Conway was unable to make his own health care decisions. That was a formal, legal acknowledgement that the man who had made millions of people laugh could no longer make choices for himself. As part of the settlement agreement, Kelly Conway consented to Charlene's appointment. In exchange, she was granted visitation rights and permission to meet with her father's healthcare professionals. It was a compromise. Kelly did not get the control she wanted, but she got the access she needed. The absence of any public will or probate filing for Tim Conway suggests one of several possibilities. His assets may have been placed in a living trust before his sickness incapacitated him, which would bypass public probate entirely. Alternatively, Charlene may have inherited everything as his legal spouse of 35 years under California law. Or the March 2019 settlement may have included private financial provisions for the children that were never made public. With Charlene appointed conservator before Conway's death, she controlled his medical care, living situation, and financial affairs in his final months. The conservatorship ended upon Conway's death on May 14, 2019. He was 85 years old. He died at a Los Angeles care facility, with his wife Charlene and one of his daughters, Jackie, at his side. The cause of death was complications from normal pressure hydrocephalus. Interestingly, his representative said that when he died, he had no signs of Alzheimer's or dementia. Conway was buried at Westwood Village Memorial Park in Westwood, California, in the Sanctuary of Prayer section. His grave inscription reads, "Beloved husband, father, and papa," followed by a line that could have come from one of his sketches. It's hard to be sad when you're laughing. That rainy day is here. The conservatorship battle revealed a family in crisis. But what it did not reveal was something else. Something about the people Conway worked with for decades. Because behind the laughter and the broken characters and the improvised genius, there were tensions, there were grudges, there were colleagues who did not get along with Tim Conway at all. And for years, the public never knew. The tensions the public never saw. Tim Conway made millions of people laugh, but not everyone found his antics funny. Behind the scenes, there were writers who resented him, guest stars who felt disrespected, and cast members who reached their breaking point. The public never saw any of it. When Conway died in 2019, the public expected to see certain faces at his funeral, but that was not the case. Carol Burnett was not there, but at 86 years old and living out of state, distance was the likely reason. Vicki Lawrence was not there, but she paid public tribute instead. Harvey Korman had died in 2008. Ernest Borgnine had died in 2012. Dick Van Dyke was not there either. He had been a guest star who allegedly didn't take a liking to Conway, not a close personal friend. In 1977, Dick Van Dyke learned what it felt like to be on the other side of a Conway improvisation. During a sketch, Conway ad-libbed what became known as the elephant story, describing conjoined Siamese elephants connected at the trunk. But unlike Corman, who had signed up for years of Conway's chaos, Van Dyke was a guest who did not agree to any of it. Sources indicate Van Dyke was visibly annoyed that Conway's antics derailed the sketch from being completed properly. Gary Belkin, one of the show's writers, was also constantly pissed about what Conway did. He explained that it was usually a choice between a well-written sketch and a bloopers episode, and the producers decided audiences would rather see the bloopers version. Belkin added that the shame of it was that Conway was always better in the first, straight performance. People did not get to see what a great comic actor he was when he was not focusing on trying to make Harvey Korman break character. One of the most telling moments came from Vicki Lawrence. Before the elephant story taping, Carol Burnett took took Lawrence aside and demanded she keep it together, and Lawrence agreed. Then the director told her that Conway was changing his elephant story and wished her good luck. Lawrence later vented to her husband, a makeup artist on the show, about Conway always getting to go off the rails. Her husband listened and then gave her a simple piece of advice. He told her to give Conway a taste of his own medicine. The next time Conway started ad-libbing, Lawrence fired back with a line that was not in the script, asking him if he was finished with his little performance. It was a rare moment of genuine frustration slipping through on air. Some critics labeled Conway's habit of making cast members break character as unprofessional and rude to the audience. The late comedian Phyllis Diller publicly criticized Conway and Corman's on-screen breaking, calling it rude because it signaled to the audience when to laugh rather than letting the comedy stand on its own. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click on the next video on your screen, like this video, and subscribe to our channel for more updates.